Hey, I got a question for you. Are you fairly muscular, but carrying a little bit more fat than you like? Or maybe you're lean, but you're not really that strong. Maybe you're strong, but you're lacking in endurance. Maybe you're decently fit, but you can't go play a game of pickup basketball, sprint across the yard chasing your kids or the dog without worrying about pulling a muscle. If any of that resonates with you, you're not alone. But it's not because you're getting older. It's because most fitness programs focus on specialization. They focus on maximizing strength, maximizing power, maximizing endurance, or maximizing lean muscle. Now, this approach to fitness might win you trophies. You might win powerlifting competitions, bodybuilding competitions. You might have done well in track and field. But it doesn't build transferable strength, real world athleticism, the things that, maybe you can deadlift 500 pounds in the gym, but then spend the day moving furniture with a friend leaves you completely gassed out after a couple of hours. And when your fitness doesn't help other aspects of your life, when it's not an asset to your life as a whole, when it is more of a vanity metric to look good on the beach in the summertime or to impress your buddies with how much you can lift, it's going to be the first thing that gets dropped when life gets hectic and chaotic, which we all know it will. If we haven't met before, my name is Aaron Kubitz. I'm the founder of Functional Aesthetics of Eau Claire. For over 20 years, I've helped busy guys get lean, stay strong, and perform like athletes without spending all their time in the gym. In today's video, I'm going to explain why, even if you are hitting the gym a couple of times a week, your body might not be looking or feeling the way that you would like it to after 40. So here's the problem. Most programs focus on one dimension of fitness, maybe two. And they're really good at doing that. That's why they've been around for so long. But you have to ask yourself, are you trying to be a professional athlete? Are you trying to be a competitive athlete? Are you just trying to feel better, look better, and still be looking and feeling good when you're 80, not just setting some records today and then talking about what you used to be able to do when you were 25, 30, and maybe even 40 years old? Because let's be honest, there are guys who are in their 40s and 50s still going hard, but this is not the majority, and this is especially the guys who have a family, they have, busy career, maybe you're a business owner, and you don't have hours and hours to spend at the gym, or perhaps you don't want to spend all of your free time working out and counting macros and calories and all that kind of stuff. Most guys want to have the kind of fitness that allows them to drag a deer out of the woods without pulling a muscle, to be able to do a day of yard work without waking up stiff and sore the next day, to be able to go and play some pickup basketball, play some volleyball, maybe play a little flag football or whatever at a family barbecue, at a family reunion or whatever, and not be feeling it for 3 days afterwards. In essence, to be able to experience life fully without having any hindrances or inhibitions to what they can do. And of course, looking good with your shirt off, having a flat stomach, not being over like 15% body fat is a great asset as well. And in fact, every guy over 40 should be able to be under 15% body fat year-round without severe restriction, marathon workouts, and all this other kind of stuff. So let me share a personal story to help illustrate this point. For most of my life, I worked manual labor jobs, physical sort of labor jobs. Even when I worked in healthcare, I was on my feet most of the day. And then I would squeeze in my strength training sessions either before or after I got off of work. When I transitioned into full-time fitness coaching, the nature of my work changed drastically. Now the majority of my day is spent behind a computer, reading, writing, researching, or doing videos like this. What I noticed is that initially, all my numbers in my lifts shot up. Pretty quickly, I was doing deadlifts 400 pounds for reps. But that winter, I noticed that 45 minutes of snow shoveling was wearing out my back. My back was starting to give out. My hamstrings were starting to feel fatigued. Doing all this shoveling And I realized that what I had gained in raw strength and those more impressive numbers in your bigger lifts, I had lost in overall fitness. See, most sports and life don't require just extreme endurance or maximal strength. Most sports and real life activities require a combination of strength with endurance, muscle with mobility. That is true fitness. Now, if you're a busy guy and you're saying, yeah, but I don't have the time to train like an athlete anymore. Good. I'm a busy guy too, and you don't need 2-hour workouts to be strong, lean, and athletic. In fact, one of the most common things that I see is guys will say, I don't have time to train, but their mindset is, I want to keep on training like a competitive athlete. You don't need to train like a competitive athlete to have a flat stomach, heck, to even have a six-pack, to have above average strength, and to have more energy and capability throughout the day. Instead, you need to have an alignment between your training, your nutrition, and the other things in your life so that it efficiently all works together to make you better at the dictates of your day-to-day life. Here's another piece that a lot of guys over 40 don't take into consideration. It's not just the age, it's also the environment that you are working with. The workouts that worked at 25, they might work at 40 if you have the same environment that you had at 25, but the reality is most of us at 40 don't have the same environment that we had at 20, and the reality is that our bodies are changing. When you were 25, you could go hard, you could ignore recovery to a certain degree, you could stay up later, you could go hang out with the friends after playing a football game or whatever, wake up and still feel okay. You could, pull an all-nighter, go to work the next day, and be not feeling the greatest, but you could still perform, you could still get things done, right? You could neglect your mobility, you could maybe not work on the cardio stuff, not really pay attention to the nutrition end of things, and you'd be okay. After 40, your connective tissues, joints, tendons, and ligaments are less resilient than they used to be. They're less elastic, right? So you can't hammer the same amount of volume, the same amount of intensity that you did. Doesn't mean you can't do volume, doesn't mean you can't do intensity, but you can't do the same quantities and levels of that, right? Maybe you have kids, maybe you have more stress, which is disrupting your sleep as well, right? Inconsistent sleep on a regular basis will build up over time, right? You have things that pop up unexpectedly, and because you have smaller margins, if something comes up, you have to work a little later, maybe that means you have to take a day or two off from your training, and then you have to come back into it, and unlike when you were 25, you can't just jump back right to where you were before. You got to take some time to build that back up. So there's a lot of different considerations as a guy over 40 that make these workouts that are good workouts, but maybe not as applicable or effective for you at the stage of life that you're at. Now, most guys, when they approach their fitness, they're either going, and this is just not even just guys too, but just people in general. We tend to focus on the things that we're already good at and spend less time on the things that we don't enjoy as much or we're less good at, right? When in fact the inverse should be true, but I completely get why you would do that. If you're a guy who's naturally a little bit bigger, you gain strength and muscle pretty easily, you tend to push more of that. If you're a guy who was maybe you were a cross-country runner or something like that when you were in high school or college, then you're 40 years old and when you get back into fitness, you just start pounding the pavement again, thinking that you'll get your old high school body back. The reality is running and cardiovascular exercise by itself is not very effective at helping to shed off body fat. The reason that you were lean and athletic at that stage in your life was not because of the running per se. It was because of that your body was growing, you were playing sports, and you were getting fit over time. But most of you weren't losing weight while you were doing that. You weren't getting leaner than you already were lean. So the same approach is unlikely to work for you now, right? Another common thing is guys will bounce back and forth between different fitness routines, right? They'll try, I like to call it workout ADD. They'll go from this exercise routine and then they get bored with that and then they hop to the other one, or this high intensity training or something like Mike Metzer stuff, that becomes really popular and it promises really short gains in a short period of time, so let's go all in on that. And then you get bored with that, so let's maybe go do some high rock stuff, and you're chasing the trends, whatever is popular, whatever is trending, rather than sticking to tried and true methods. And also, not necessarily just a tried and true method, finding a method that matches the context of your life, right? Because most workout routines, most fitness routines, as well as diets, are effective, but are they effective for you? And what makes a diet or an exercise routine effective for you comes down to a combination of your genetics, your lifestyle. So a guy who's working for, UPS, the post office or whatever, or doing construction work, his workout routine that's going to be effective for him is going to be a little bit different than a guy who spends most of his time sitting behind a desk. Same thing with a diet, right? If we look into study of like nutrigenomics, anthropological studies, different things like that, metabolic studies, right? We can see that your ancestry, your genetics and stuff play a role in the kinds of diets that you are most likely to thrive on, right? The other thing is, what does the context of your life look like? Matching the diet to the training that you're planning to do. This might be a great diet, but if you're doing, doing marathon training and then eating a diet that's supposed to get you shredded six-pack abs and trying to mesh those two things together, it's a recipe for disaster, right? So, getting some focus to your training and your nutrition. These are some of the reasons that I created hybrid strength training. Not variety for the sake of variety, but structured training that delivers well-balanced fitness in a reasonable amount of time. We're combining aspects of muscular endurance training or calisthenics training, right, with bodybuilding training, powerlifting, and then athletic or speed, power, and agility training. Not mashed together at random, but delivered strategically so that you get strength with endurance, muscle without getting stiff and tight, endurance without losing your muscle or burning you out. After 40, you have less margin for error. Structured, precise training, clarity on what you're trying to achieve, and then being precise and structured in the way that you pursue that is what separates the guys who are still going hard at 40, 50, and 60 from the guys who are bragging about what they used to be able to do. Now, these days, it's really popular to talk about hybrid athlete training, hybrid fitness, right? You got Nick Bare, BPN supplements and stuff. You got and if you haven't heard of hybrid training before, in essence, it's lift like a power lifter, run like a marathon runner, right? And you're combining all these things together. But most guys' approach to hybrid training is something like doing HIIT on Tuesday, a long run on the weekend, doing some really heavy lifting on Wednesday, and mixing in maybe some calisthenic stuff or whatever, and just mishmash together with no rhyme or reason to the sequencing of how they're doing that. That's not hybrid training. That's just chaos. It's burning a lot of energy without a direct payoff. And the reason this strategy, this structure, this layering and sequencing of exercises is so important is because the interference effect is a real thing. If you do too much heavy lifting, you fry your nervous system. Too much endurance work interferes with lifting, with heavy lifting, with muscle, right? And vice versa. So the key to being able to perform all these metrics and to sustain that long term so that your workouts are building you up is the sequencing of how it's all put together. Because it's not just getting through the workouts, it's also being able to recover from them. Do you want to be the guy who looks muscular, looks strong, or the guy who actually is athletic? The guy who can actually perform well, not just looks like a good looking like mannequin, right? Not to say that the two are mutually exclusive, but if all you do is train on gym machines, if all you're doing is chasing PRs in the gym, and never train any metrics outside of that, then it's very likely what you'll end up being. And at 40 plus, the real flex isn't how much you can bench press, how much you can squat, how far you can run. It's preparing your body to still be doing those things when you're 80 plus years old. When you can still do pull-ups when you're 80 years old. When you can still do handstands when you're 80 years old. When you can still go jog a mile if you're 80 years old. Right? Essentially being able to feel good and be athletic right up until the day you die. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, this doesn't take a lot of time. In fact, most of the guys that I work with are getting these workouts done in 20 to 30 minutes a day. And the key is the integration, the synergy between the diet, the workouts, and the clarity on what you're training for, along with the sequencing of the exercises. We're giving you the minimal effective dose to gain the strength, the muscle, the power, the muscular endurance, and allowing you enough time for recovery as well. And what enables you to do that is by controlling the inputs, right? A lot of guys are trying to outrun their appetite, right? They figure, well, I can't control how much I'm eating, and this isn't necessarily a willpower either, right? On my Facebook page, I was writing a series about pros and cons of the carnivore diet, and then we started getting into the issues of metabolic typing and things like that, right? Low carb diets work great for some guys, right? Other guys do well on a little bit lower fat, moderate carbs, high protein, right? I've tried all those different things, and I tend to go and feel and perform my best mentally and physically on a lower carbohydrate, higher fat diet. So if a diet's not working for you, if you can't control your calorie intake, it's not necessarily a discipline problem. More often than not, it's a mismatch, right, between what your body was designed to run on and what you're eating. And we all know that you will never win in a battle of wills against your physiology. Get stuck in a box where they don't feed you at all, then you have no choice. But if the food is there and you don't have the structure to sustain it, you don't know what you're going to be eating, and you're not balancing those macronutrients appropriately, such that it naturally manages hunger, energy, and cravings, then you're always going to be trying to outrun your diet, trying to burn off more calories. Now, I understand that not everybody is doing it for those reasons. Doing a high rocks thing, doing a CrossFit Games competition, right? Going on a long trail run, right? Actually, to me, the Leadville 100 is like a 100-mile race through some of the hills out in Colorado and stuff. Being out in nature and just running for mile and mile after mile actually sounds like fun to me, right? But I want to have the control over whether I'm doing that for fun or I'm doing it because I need to maintain my weight. Years ago, I had a manager. He prided himself every week, or every day, he would say, I'll go run 5 miles after I get done with work, right? And the only thing I would really ever see him eat at lunch was a couple of pieces of fruit, right? And then I would see him buying things like Frosted Flakes and frosted shredded wheat and things like that. And he was doing all this work, but he was a slave to it. He wasn't doing it for the fun of it. He wasn't doing it for the love of doing it. He was doing it because he didn't know how to control the intake because the diet was wrong. And so he had to do this to keep his weight down. If he would miss a few days, you'd start ballooning back up again. And it shouldn't be that way. Everybody should move every single day. It doesn't have to be a structured workout. In fact, the majority of the exercise you do should not be structured workouts. Everybody should be doing a minimum of 2 full body workouts a week, right? Strength training, right? Do a little bit of higher intensity cardiovascular exercise too. But then move your body every single day. Go for a walk, do some gardening, do some yard work, do some yoga, some stretching stuff. Move your body every single day for at least an hour, right? But it shouldn't be something that you're doing it because you're trying to control your weight, right? Now, I did mention that, the strength training workouts, 20 to 30 minutes, right? But you can go do some walking and stuff too, right? Outside of that. That's why I talk about the hour thing. Maybe do a little bit in the morning, maybe do a little bit later in the evening. That would be ideal. But my guys are still dropping, when you do it right, the sequencing is right? The guys are losing, 15 to 20 plus pounds in 16 weeks while increasing their energy, increasing lean muscle, gaining noticeable strength, and building their energy, their capacity, their performance is showing up and how they're performing better outside the gym, not just inside the gym. I remember when I was in high school, right? I'd go out there and I'd do these super long runs, or I'd play basketball for hours and hours, and then after that all I wanted to do was lay around and eat, right? And that's not adding to your life when you're doing all this stuff. Sure, you see some of these influencers and they're doing all this stuff, but are they then running a business? Are they taking care of their family on all the other things they have to do outside of that? Or is their workout and their fitness routine wearing them down so that it's almost like a full-time job outside of their other job, right? It doesn't have to be that way. Every guy can get in shape, can have a flat stomach. There's no reason, especially in 2026, there's no reason why you should be overweight, out of shape. Right? We have the information available, but sometimes it's the structuring, how you sequence that stuff together, that makes the biggest difference to make sure that you can get it all in a short period of time. I've worked a lot of labor jobs, like I said in the past, right? And I know a lot of guys that still work, blue collar jobs, right? And they will, they think that, hey, I'm in shape because I'm doing all this stuff on my job. And they were when they were in their 20s, and then they get 40, 45 years old, and all of a sudden it's not working as well anymore, right? Because that's the issue. Simply just being physically active doesn't guarantee that you're going to be lean, right? It doesn't mean starving yourself either. It means having structure to how you do things, right? A rhyme and a reason, and progressively moving towards the mark rather than, doing things in extremes so that you're circling back around and 5 years later you're still back at the same place that you started at. So in summary, after 40, you shouldn't continue to train like you did as a high school, college athlete, or 25-year-old man. But that doesn't mean that you can't build muscle, you can't stay lean, and you can't continue to be strong. There's a difference between training wrong and having the right program, right? There's a difference between getting old and training wrong. It's not that you can't get these things, it's that if you continue to train with a mismatched program, mismatched mindset, then it will be much harder to do that. So if you're interested in learning how guys over 40 are losing 15 to 20 plus pounds in a matter of a few months, keeping that off while gaining more energy, athleticism, and performing better in other metrics of their life outside of the gym, in just 20 to 30 minutes a day, go ahead and shoot me an email at the email address down in the description for this video, or feel free to grab one of the free resources. I have a couple of ebooks that I've written down in the links below. You can grab those as well. And if you're a guy over 40 who wants to continue staying strong, lean, and athletic into your 50s and beyond, consider subscribing to the channel. That's what we cover here. We cover diet, training, hormone optimization, injury prevention, how to work around those injuries should you sustain them, all those things on this channel. If you liked the video, if it gave you some value, go ahead and hit the like button, and I'll see you all next time.